The detective threw photos of the children who had become his victims into Lee's cell. At last, the criminal would pay for everything. However, behind the guards stood a man, Lee's man, who pulled a knife out of a trash bin and slashed a warden in the throat. He then began shooting the others with a pistol. At the same time, Lee snatched a weapon from the detective. The criminal was gunned down, but he had already completed his mission. The dangerous criminal stepped out of the cell. He wanted to kill the police officer with his bare hands. The boss handed out guns to the criminals so they could start a massacre and kill the remaining guards. As a result of the shootout, another 12.5 people were sent to the afterlife. Everyone except Lee. One day, the waves washed some guy ashore. He spent 2 months in a coma under the care of Dr. Eileen. During all that time, no one ever visited him. Finally, the patient woke up and fell off the bed. The guy remembered nothing, not even his own name, so he introduced himself as Ismail, after a character from the book Moby Dick. The patient's amnesia was easy to explain. Fragments of a bullet were stuck in his head. Over time, Ismail grew close to Eileen. The girl hoped to help him regain his memory. Criminal boss Lee was late to his meeting with the gangsters, and instead of getting down to business, he started eating noodles right in front of them. One of the men was unhappy with the quality of the weapons and powder that Lee supplied. He was planning to get rid of the boss and seize power on the island. Outside, another team was waiting for a signal. However, Lee had not come alone either, and his people were much more dangerous. For example, the bespectacled Bessie could easily deal with the enemies on the street all by himself. Another group was handled by his bodyguard Rika. She stabbed the gangsters with a hidden knife, and the rest were too scared to fight her after that. One of the men tried to attack Lee, but Lee stabbed him in the neck with a chopstick. Then Lee shot everyone except the guy sitting next to him. The survivor, Bondi, insisted that the dead man was not his boss. He explained that a couple of months ago, the waves had washed up the body of a man who was close to his old boss. Bondi managed to beg for mercy but lost one of his ears. Now he had to go to the hospital and find out about that man. Meanwhile, Ismail befriended the fisherman who had saved him. Bondi arrived at the hospital and began asking Eileen questions about the recently rescued patient. The guy started getting physical. Ismail twisted one of his arms. In response, the gangster smashed a bottle over his head. At that moment, something switched inside Ismail's brain. His awakened reflexes allowed him to easily disarm the gangster. He nearly gouged out his opponent's eye. Bondi got scared and ran away. That evening, Eileen suggested that Ismail travel with her to Jakarta to have the bullet fragments removed from his head. But the guy was now afraid he might turn out to be a bad person. He did not want to put Eileen in danger, so he decided to find out who he used to be first. However, it was already too late. The gangsters saw them together at the bus stop. Eileen calmly rode toward Jakarta, unaware of the nightmare that was about to unfold. The road was blocked, the driver stopped, and was immediately shot. The gangsters thought Abdi had also taken this bus. That was Ismail's real name, but he had stayed behind in town. Eileen called him, and the guy heard the gangsters open fire on the passengers. They killed everyone on the bus except Eileen and a small girl. When they learned that Abdi was not on the bus, a gangster pointed his gun at Eileen and the child. The fisherman drove Abdi to the bus. Inside lay a mass of remains, but Eileen was not among them. Another group of gangsters had arrived to finish the job. Seeing Abdi, one of the gangsters drew a machete but accidentally rammed it into the bus roof. At first, Abdi struggled, but the body remembers how to effectively kill enemies. One of the attackers managed to douse him with gasoline. All that was left was to set him on fire, but Abdi managed to shoot him in the eye and then pressed harder. His partner still managed to set the bus ablaze. Escaping, Abdi burst through the window and tore off his burning jacket. The gangster did not give up trying to set the fighter on fire, but soon flames engulfed him instead. One last enemy remained, and he had a gun. The fisherman rushed to protect his friend and was shot in the stomach. Unfortunately, the wound was fatal, and the old man died in Abdi's arms. Suddenly, our hero was knocked out by a police officer. Eileen and the little girl were dragged into some basement. Bondi had never seen this place before and began asking questions. The bald man did not hesitate. He shot him dead. There were cameras here. The captives were separated. Abdi regained consciousness at the police station. The police captain showed him a photo of Boss Lee. This man caused real massacres wherever he appeared, left piles of corpses behind, and took children aged 6 to 10 with him. From those children, he raised loyal killers who now terrorized the entire island. Each of them was ready to die for their master. 2 months ago, Lee was found without guards or weapons. Back then, the police had no trouble arresting the mysterious criminal. Then the man showed a photo where Abdi was hanging out with Lee. At that moment, the power in the station went out. Gunshots followed. The captain approached the window and a machete pierced his head. Abdi was supposed to be the next victim. However, the killer made a mistake and accidentally helped him break free. Abdi smashed him with a table and impaled him on his own machete. Right then, a grenade was thrown into the office. The sturdy desk saved the hero. The station was swarmed by gangsters, but Abdi managed to shoot them all. 2 bald thugs with rifles were standing outside the door. Abdi again managed to survive. One of the attackers went to turn the lights back on so it would be easier to find their target. The second stayed behind with our hero one-on-one. Abdi waited until the bullets ran out and then lunged at the thug. The berserk fighter beat him badly, but under the table, Abdi found a shotgun. There were not enough shells for the second opponent. He also decided to settle things in hand-to-hand combat. The big man lifted the guy up with outstretched arms and tried to strangle him. Then Abdi used everything he could, a fire extinguisher, a phone, and a paper cutter. The enemy got really angry, but Abdi did not give up. He kept hitting and breaking the brute for a long time, but still could not kill him. The giant refused to stop, and Abdi eventually had to beat him to death with his fists. Afterwards, he remembered how he used to spend time with these guys, and could not believe they had once been friends. Lee brought the girl into Eileen's cell and called his fighter. The boss asked him not to kill Abdi, but as it turned out, he would not have been able to anyway. Lee grabbed Eileen by the throat so his protege could hear her choking. The captive did not panic and stabbed him in the shoulder with scissors. Lee remembered how his best soldier had rebelled against him. It was Abdi who handed him over to the police back then. Abdi himself found an old well. Inside were children with no food or water. They were forced to fight until only the strongest survived. Bisi was his brother in misery. He would serve the father until the end of his life. But Abdi could walk away right now, except he would not leave Eileen in danger. Bisi hid behind the trees. Facing him would be harder than fighting those bald fighters. Bisi jumped down from a tree and attacked. His weapon was a telescopic baton, which he wielded perfectly. The killer used it to deliver powerful blows, but our hero fought back well with his bare hands. At one point, Bisi received such a strong hit to the head that he lost his senses and walked off somewhere forward. He fell to his knees and died on the seashore. Right then, Rika opened fire at Abdi, but she was a sniper. All bullets went into the sand. The woman accused Abdi of destroying their family. Bisi had once been his friend. The guy threw sand in her face and took her gun. She was the one who shot him in the head 2 months ago for betraying their father. Rika pulled out a knife and slashed Abdi. Apparently, he would have to fight her hand to hand as well, but Abdi could not force himself to kill the woman. Because of that, he received more and more cuts. When he realized that talking would not work, he kicked Rika in the head twice, then took her knife. Abdi offered Rika a chance to leave their father. She could still be free. But instead, the girl pulled out a backup pistol and opened fire. However, she was shooting to the side. Abdi's reflex kicked in, and he threw her own knife at Rika. The sister died in his arms. In the end, Abdi remembered everything and called Lee. He was not a legend of the criminal world. He was a sick bastard who loved torturing children. Abdi reached the bunker where the hostages were being held. At the same time, a guard threw Eileen onto the bed and climbed on top of her. The second captive smashed a plate over his head. Eileen defended herself with a shard, but it was not enough. She could not strangle the guard either, but during the struggle, she managed to grab his weapon. The young captive switched the rifle off safety, and Eileen shot her attacker. She also gunned down the other guard. Unfortunately, an armed squad appeared further down the hallway. The hostages were cornered, but at that exact moment, Abdi broke into the bunker. He killed the guards and told Eileen to get out, but the girl no longer trusted him. He had been the same kind of monster as her kidnappers. And indeed, he had been. But he did everything he could to change, and Eileen had helped him do that. Unfortunately, the nightmare was not over yet, because the main villain was still alive. He attacked Abdi and began scolding him like a father scolding a disobedient son. Only now did he learn that all his other children were already dead. But the truth was, they had died long ago, the moment they were taken out of the well. The final battle with the main boss began. The old master had excellent technique, but on the young fighter's side were speed and strength. Because of the bullet fragments, every blow to the head caused Abdi real damage. Lee intended to finish his opponent, but instead shattered a stone slab. Abdi landed many strikes to the old man's chest. The killer caught his breath and ran outside for fresh air, but he did not flee. He continued the fight. Abdi broke his arm, but Lee managed surprisingly well, even with only one limb. In the end, Abdi impaled his enemy on a tree branch. But even then, the old man pulled Abdi toward him. Eileen grabbed Abdi at the last moment and pulled him back. Once again, she saved his life. This time, they were both taken to the hospital. The fragments of the bullet were finally removed from Abdi's head. All that remained was to wait for him to wake up from the coma again. The girl wrote the name Abdi on the patient's card, but then erased it. He had to decide for himself what name he wanted to bear. Suddenly, the guy woke up and asked her to write down the name Ismail.